Thank you. My topic today is removing the mask, women returning to work after depression. First, I want to look at the literature that exists on depression, and we find that this is an urgent and complex topic. It's the leading cause of disease worldwide, and 70% of the 1 million Canadians with depression are working. But even though they're working, their productivity plummets because of the symptoms of the disease. There's more lost work days than any other medical condition. There's 5 to 10 times more common than other diseases. The length of episodes are longer, so people are off work for a longer period of time. And depression affects more women than men at a ratio of 2 to 1. And there's some question whether that may be related to the multiple roles that women have. So the purpose of this study, and it was a grounded theory study, was to expand our gender-based knowledge, inform policy and practice by exploring the experiences and implications of workplace reentry for women who have been off work because of a depression. It's a qualitative study using grounded theory, and I interviewed 40 women who had returned to work after having a depression. And I started that interviewing with a pilot project of 10 women, and in that I refined questions and my interview guide that I used, and using a very conversational approach. It was a convenience and purposeful sampling. I advertised my study with posters that I placed in strategic places around the province, and I also advertised in a newspaper. I wanted a community sample rather than a single workplace. So as a result, the sample included women who worked at universities, at hospitals, government offices, retail businesses, teachers. They came from a whole variety of backgrounds. So in the end, there were 40 English-speaking women over 19 years of age, and the age range was from 23 to 64, with the mean age being 46.5. 19 of these women were single, and 21 were married. 1 was First Nation or Aboriginal, and 5 were Francophone. 10 were mothers, and they were currently employed, but had been off work for at least a 3-month lapse because of their illness. So the data was audio recorded and transcribed verbatim, and after that there was a constant comparison through the data and the development of categories and then themes. The depression experience, the women described the experience as being in a black hole. And you do see that in the literature as well. But they talked about it as being a very dark place where they didn't feel very well at all. There was overwhelming fatigue and sadness. They talked about having poor memory and an inability to concentrate. And that was related to the fatigue as well as the memory problem. There were changes in their eating and changes in their personal grooming, and just a general disinterest in their normal activities of daily living. Now, when they were at work, depression and work, the women talked about how they had a hard time to get out of bed to go to work. They just wanted to stay on their couch or a sofa. They got really behind at work. They talked about being bombarded with email, and they just couldn't keep on top of it, and how they avoided social contact. They talked, and this is one of the key findings, they had to put on a face. And that's why this picture with the 2 masks. Women talked about putting on a mask because they didn't want people to know that they were depressed, so they were hiding their illness. They were overwhelmed by the amount of work, they couldn't focus, and they had no attention span. So as you can see, working was very difficult and very stressful for them. When they were put off work by their physician, they felt a certain sense of relief that they didn't have to go out of their house because they were quite content to stay isolated in their homes. They talked about they didn't have to put on a face. So in other words, they didn't have to wear that mask anymore. They didn't have to hide their true feelings. They were worried what people would think, but they also said there was little or no contact from the workplace. Now, returning to work, the women talked about needing a gradual return, and that was related to their memory being poor and their limited concentration. But they didn't feel that they had any support. They talked about how if they had had a broken leg, that they would have been supported. But because it was a mental illness, they didn't feel that same sense of support. They said once you're back, the work is piled on, and as if you're fixed, and there's no recognition that maybe you're not completely well when you do return to work. In other instances, women were put at a desk and not given any work to do because people thought maybe they were unwell. And of course, that just added to their feelings of low self-esteem if they weren't given anything to do. One woman said, "I'm at the end of a hallway and I don't see anyone. I only see them if they go to the photocopier. I have nothing to do and no one to talk to. It's very strange. I'm in a broken down chair that I'm sitting on and a 1960s desk." So she was just physically put off in a dumpy area of the office where she had little contact with people. Now, there are barriers to returning to work. There's stigma and discrimination. There's fear of self-disclosing. And there's the concentration and memory issues. So these all make it difficult for women to return to work. In terms of stigma, this woman said, "Because once you are tagged with mental illness, you're a problem to the corporation. You are either going to be laid off or fired, or you are just seen as somebody that cannot handle responsibility. That's too fragile. I cannot tell you the amount of prejudice in the workplace." And as a result of this, these women continued to wear the masks to hide what they were really feeling so that they could avoid the stigma. Another woman said, "One person that I told that I was off for anxiety and depression said, 'Oh yeah, we're all stressed here, but we don't get to take the summer off.' So very little support. Now, there were benefits to returning to work as well. Economically, it was beneficial because their long-term coverage may have been running out or expired. It gave them some structure to help in the recovery. And it also gave them an opportunity to combat social isolation. Now, the recurring themes was battling adversity. And the women talked about battling depression, so they were actually battling this disease. And even though they were back to work, they weren't completely well. They battled the workplace because of the stigma. They battled the institution, and that is the policies and procedures that go around returning to work when one's still not well. They found that everything was institutionally focused, whether that was the workplace or the healthcare system. It really wasn't focused on the individual woman. It was on the institution. In terms of battling adversity, this woman said, "I was told by the insurance company that I had to return to work or my benefits would be cut off. I wasn't ready, but I went back. After my 30-day progressive return, I met with HR, and they told me that my corporate values differed from theirs and that they were laying me off. Then the security guard accompanied me back to my office, and I picked up my stuff. They gave me $25,000 to shut up. I was disgusted, but too weak to fight them." Another reoccurring theme was that of the active practice of silence. The women concealed their depression and disclosed it only strategically. There was also secrecy within the workplace. And of course, the women contributed to that secrecy because they concealed their depression. So I didn't tell them I had a depression. I just told them I had surgery. It's easier that way. I didn't disclose. I had taken some time off, and so they knew I was taking off for sick reasons. Initially, it was just vacation days and stuff like that. And in all honesty, I wasn't getting any support. And then secrecy within the workplace. Yeah, it's the silence. If I had arthritis, they would be saying, hey, you want to check out this book or that site? But with depression, it is so silent. So they were concerned that their colleagues weren't asking them how they were doing and being supportive of them. But at the flip side of that, they were concealing that they were depressed. So it was kind of a double-edged sword that they contributed to their own demise. Part of my depression was a feeling of loneliness, and so I'm still feeling lonely within my work environment. I've been back now for 3 weeks. Nobody has come down to my office to see how I'm doing. And if you look at this diagram, one of the participants in the study drew this, and this is the woman with her multiple masks on, and she drew this to represent battling adversity and living with depression. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Heather. She presented her qualitative research of the women experiencing depression after depression, and when she returned to work, as in terms of the benefit and the barriers. And so, do you have any question? Yes.
Thank you very much, first of all, for your presentation. I would like to know, do you have any experiences about their sexual relationship after depression? Because especially after gynecologic cancer and breast cancer or postpartum period, so much women living the depression experience, and also their sexual life is affected in this process. So we have some experiences in this subject. I would like to know if you have any other idea in this subject, because especially gynecologic cancer, their sexual relationship is very, very damaged. So, so many people worried about the divorce after these experiences.
Yes.
Do you? Yeah. And
well, I think that's what one of the major differences was in the study. These women said if they had had cancer or if they had had a broken bone, there would have been people rallying around them for support. But because it was mental illness and it was kept very hush-hush, they didn't feel that sense of support. They felt like they were out there on their own. And they contributed to that because they didn't always, or they rarely disclosed, because they didn't want people to know they had a mental illness. So they contributed to the problem too. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
Or any other question?
Thanks, it's a very interesting topic.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify. So actually you interviewed 40 participants, right? 40 women. You interviewed 40 women. So how many interviews were conducted for each participant? Because you mentioned this is the grounded theory.
One or two interviews. Yeah, most of them it was one, but I would say about 8 of them there were 2 interviews. And I found that the women called me back because they wanted to talk about their experience. So those women that I interviewed a second time, it's because they wanted me to come back.
One more question. You mentioned that actually you did the pilot for 10 women. So why you need such a big sample size for the pilot?
Well, I felt that I hadn't saturated my data with just the 10 women. And the other thing is I was interviewing women from around my province within my country. And I wanted to be representative of the provincial picture. And so I felt like I had to open it up to that many. And I interviewed everybody that responded to my call.
Well, I have one question. Yes, because I'm very much interested in the antenatal or postnatal depression. So, in your country, do you have any assessment of the prenatal or postnatal depression of the women? And do you think how much spread out the awareness of the depression in your country in general?
Depression is really common in our country, and I don't think the services meet the demand, actually. There's a lot of women that go without being treated or cared for, and the other issue is when they are treated, it is from a medical perspective, but there isn't somebody to listen to them and let them tell their story. And that is so important in that healing process, is that they be heard. And I feel that that is not done.
Yes, please.
Do you consider making a similar study in men?
I think that would be really important, yes, because I expect that it's as big a concern with men as it is with women, and they may even have more difficulty disclosing that they have a depression. So I have thought about doing that as well.
Yes, very active participation. So do they have any other comments? Then we thank you very much for your great contribution.